This lesson is on finding domain and range from a graph. So first, what are the domain and range? What do those things mean? The domain is referring to all x values that a graph is going to reach. So that's looking as far left as you can go and as far right as you can go. And the range is all y values that the graph will reach. So that's going to be how low is it going to go and how high will it go. So how far up and how far down for the range, and how far to the left and to the right for the domain. So here's our first example. If I look as far left as I can go on this graph, my arrow as it's heading downward, it is also gradually moving towards the left. So that is heading towards negative infinity on the left side of the graph. If I look at my other arrow, as that one is traveling upwards, it's also moving to the right forever. So that one is headed towards positive infinity. So at some point, all the way to the left and all the way to the right, all my x values will be covered at some point by this graph. So to describe the domain, I could either say it verbally as all real numbers, or that compound inequality on the screen is another way of writing it, showing that your x values are between negative infinity and positive infinity. Note that there's no or equal to line for either inequality symbol, and that's because infinity and negative infinity are just concepts. They're not actually something that you will ever be able to reach. Now let's talk about the range. So I'm thinking about how far down this graph is going to go, and that arrow is pointed downward forever. So it's headed towards negative infinity for the y values. Then the arrow up at the top is going up forever, headed towards positive infinity. So at some point, all the y values from bottom to top are going to be covered by the graph. So the range is also going to be all real numbers, or from negative infinity to positive infinity for y. Here's another example. So if I check as far left as my graph is going to go, that arrow is headed upward and to the left forever. So it's headed towards negative infinity. If I look at the right, that arrow is headed up and to the right, so it's going towards positive infinity forever. So my x values from left to right, everything is going to be covered again. So my domain is going to be all real numbers because every x value from left to right will be covered by this graph. My range will be restricted for this one though. If I look how low my graph is going to reach, it's going to be down at -3. So that's the lowest this graph will ever reach. Then the two arrows to the left and to the right are both headed upwards forever. So they're going towards positive infinity. So basically my graph is as low as -3 and it's everything above that as my arrows head upwards towards positive infinity. So my range can be described as y values greater than or equal to -3 because -3 is the smallest y value that the graph will ever reach. In our next example, both our x values and y values will be restricted. So the furthest to the left the graph will reach, that arrow is headed upwards and to the left, so it's going towards negative infinity for our x values. The furthest to the right, however, that point goes to +2 for the x coordinate. So for my domain, I'm starting at +2 and I'm going towards the left. I'm never going to have an x value that is bigger than +2. So my domain will be all x values less than or equal to 2. Then for the range, the lowest point is at -2 for the y coordinate. And then my arrow is headed upwards towards positive infinity from there. So -2 will be as low as my graph ever reaches, and then it'll be everything above -2 as well. So the range will be all y values greater than or equal to -2. My last example today is going to be a little bit different because nothing's going to be going towards positive infinity or negative infinity. Everything is going to be set between two numbers. So if I start with my domain, the x value furthest to the left is going to be at -3. So all those points lined up on that vertical line, furthest left they're going to be at is -3 for the x value. Furthest to the right, the x value at that point is at +3. So everything from -3 to +3 for the x values will be covered by my graph. So here's how I can write that domain. So I start with the low value, -3. I end with the high value, which is +3. X is in the middle. And then the less than or equal to symbol is used both times to indicate that x will be between -3 and +3. And it's also going to include both of those values. Now for my range. The lowest my graph is going to go is -2 for the y value. The highest point is going to be at +4 for y. And then everything in between -2 and +4 is included as well as a part of my range values. So my range, again, starting with the low end and going up to the high end, my range will be from -2 to +4 and including both of those values. And that's it.